So what do you do when the crowd wants a show, but your conscience won't let you give it? When the church that you love is in crisis and the right next step is going to cost you your job, your reputation, and even some of your friends. Today we talk to Steve Carter, formerly a teaching pastor at Willow Creek during the collapse around Bill Hybels. And we talk about the day that the headlines landed, the choices no one prepares you for, and what integrity actually sounds like when a room is begging for damage control. It's a pastor sorting through values from noise and deciding, I won't play with people's trust. We talk through the fallout, the gaslighting, the binder of angry messages, the Starbucks confrontation in front of his son, and the question every wounded leader asks, did doing the right thing just ruin my life? You'll also hear the surprising support from some of the outside voices and a jolt from a therapist that asked him the question, why are you drawn to narcissists? And the decision to step away from positions to recover a calling. We're going to walk with Steve through the wilderness, grief that won't be rushed, the discipline of breathing and waiting, Holy Saturday faith, and the slow rebuild, moving back to the Midwest, choosing place over platform, and leading again with a new center. If you're facing a transition, if truth is colliding with institutional preservation, this conversation will meet you right where you actually live. Welcome to the Life After Ministry podcast. Hey, Steve Carter. Welcome to the Life After Ministry podcast. Good to have you here.
It's an honor to be here with you, Matt. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So, hey, I don't know if you know this, but on this podcast, we talk about transition. Have you ever been through one?
I have been through some good transitions.
Yeah.
It's almost feels like it was the best of times, good transition. Mm. It was the worst of times, bad transitions, hard transitions. So I've been through everything in between. So.
Yeah, unfortunately, and there's redemption, and so that's really, even in the hard stuff. What this episode and really all the ones that we try to have on here, the through line is that there's a God that redeems and He's good, and so that is the story we're going to tell. This is not supposed to be this downer and woe is me, and I know that that's not where you're at either. So that's good. Yep. Give us a sense for somebody who says, "Who's this Steve Carter guy?" A little bit of your call coming into ministry. How did you know that this was what you wanted to do?
Yeah, I was a film major and I wanted to play college basketball. So that's what I was doing. And I had come to faith. My parents weren't believers. My mom was baptized my senior year of high school, my dad my sophomore year of college, and got to do both of those baptisms. And so people saw something in me that I didn't necessarily see in myself. And so when my dad was baptized, he felt called to move to Grand Rapids and sell out of his company, restore a relationship with his folks. And I just saw that God was moving in my family. And so I also realized I was a 5'11", point guard with no actual jump shot or actual reality of making it to the NBA. And so felt like it was probably better to go with where the Holy Spirit was leading. And so went to Grand Rapids, and there was a church that was starting there and got plugged in. And I just began to get curious because I really resonated with this preacher and the way that he was communicating, and felt like I've never heard anyone talk like this and make the Bible like so accessible, and it was so thoughtful, and it was so rich. And so I just remember like asking him questions. How do you know you're supposed to go into ministry? And he didn't tell me to go into ministry, but he asked me a couple of questions, and I didn't have answers for it. But I remember going home, and there was a message on my answering machine, and it was from another pastor who basically answered the question of the meeting that had just happened with this preacher, and offered me a job. And I just, as a youth pastor, and it was like the weirdest, God is in this. And so I didn't end up taking the job. I went back to California, to Bible college, and graduated, and went back to Michigan to serve at the church, then was in Costa Mesa, Orange County, California, then to Chicago, and at Willow Creek. And so it's just been kind of this following where God is leading, and just had the time of my life of getting to serve the local church.
Yeah. So if we're talking about mountains and valleys, your time at Willow Creek is pretty significant, and you get a role there to be able to teach on a pretty big platform. And it has to be like the apex moment of like, did you wake up on Sunday mornings and think like, this is what I was made for? Did you love it? Like, what was that season like for you?
Yeah, I still remember like 6 months in, this moment of just doing announcements and looking at the congregation and realizing, oh, these are my people. Like these are like, we get one another. And it just felt like there was like an attachment that had happened, that God had just really, really blessed. And just the gravitational pull that Willow had, you could dream something up as a teacher. And I remember one time I was saying I wanted to do this talk about a lighthouse, and the creative team was listening. And 2 days later, I got a phone call. Hey, come down to the stage. And I go down to the stage, and there's a 4-story lighthouse that a guy just built. And I was like, what in the world? I just had never been in a context that if you dream it, we can make it happen. And so it took the teaching gift to another level. It just took the pastoral accessibility to another level. I feel like I got an MBA working there, just from the leadership, and what I was able to glean from that place. And so, I always say I have 2,000 positive stories and 24 difficult ones. But doesn't negate the 2,000 incredible stories that helped shape and form me and prepare me for the role I'm in today.
Yeah. And so you got to work with an incredible leader, an incredible teacher in Bill Hybels, and then everything starts to crumble, and it goes from this incredible moment to, my God, what's happening? When was the writing on the wall for you with some of that happening?
Yeah, I would say the writing on the wall wasn't a thought. It was the primary thought for me was, how can I help this church that I love through this? And I just felt like the way forward was surrender, humility, repentance, transparency, vulnerability. And I think that when you have a church that's going through a real public crisis with your founding pastor, and, percentage, like attendance wasn't down that much, giving wasn't down that much. And so I think for the elders, I think they were looking at this going, hey, we're going to get through this. And I just kept saying, no, we're not. This is not going away until we actually can say we sinned. And the person who sinned had to be able to say, I sinned, but he was gone. And then it fell to another group of people. And I think in that organizational, institutional preservation, I think that there was just struggle within the elder board. What do we say? What do we do? And I felt like I had the trust of the congregation. And I just felt like I needed to push forward to say, hey, I don't want to play with people's trust. We know something happened. We have evidence. So let's just move forward. And I had seen this at Rock Harbor when I was there, the similar thing. And I watched a church lead through that well. So it wasn't like like there's no way to lead through this, or I just felt like this was a chance to show the world, just like Willow had shown the world what leadership looks like. I thought this was going to be the chance that we were going to show what accountability and what repentance and what restoration and reconciliation could look like. And so that was my hope. I was probably holding on to that, believing with the relationships I had with the women and with the organization, that I could bring people together and there could be some sense of there's a way forward. And then August 5th, that story broke in the New York Times, and I just realized there were about 5 issues I felt with that article. And it just felt like, if I get on that stage, I'm going to be, and we can't address this, I'm going to be playing with people's trust. And I just, I had a youth pastor, Hal. He's no longer with us. He died in a motorcycle accident a number of years ago, but he always would look at me and say, "Hey, Steve, I don't care how many points you score. I don't care what your grades are. I don't care where you go to school. All I care about is, did you have integrity today?" And integrity is gained seconds, minutes, hours, days, months, years, decades, and can be lost in seconds. And then he just asked me, "Did you have integrity today?" And for me, that has just always been a word that I don't care how good a talk is. I don't care how big a church is. What I care is, do I say what I mean? Do I mean what I say? Even if I have to tell myself, even if I have to be asked to give an account or to be held accountable. And that cognitive dissonance of institutional preservation versus vulnerability just didn't feel like the Willow I knew, to be honest. And I think if it would have happened, I think a lot of good would have come through that difficulty. A lot of good.
Yeah. So the integrity piece, obviously huge as part of, like, one of the deciding factors of what do I do? And we've talked with people who are in a very similar place of, I know something's not right. It's not public. It's not New York Times kind of information, or it hasn't hit Julie Roy's yet, but it's one of those things that they're struggling with. So were there other pieces, or like, how do you make a decision like that? Where there's an element of confidentiality and you have to keep it inside the institution, but like, so can you go to people within the organization? Did you have to go to people outside the organization? Did you feel like you had to bottle it all up for yourself? Like, I'm trying to think through the person who is in that situation right now, and they're trying to figure out, I don't know what to do, and I don't want to burn the ships, but it's a tough, like, what's the matrix for making a decision like that?
Matt, that's such an insightful question. And to be honest, I didn't know who I could trust, because almost every single day, once we found out a story was going to be coming out in the Chicago Tribune in March of 2018, and I found out from my editor, who is in Colorado Springs, and I had submitted a book, and it was through my editor saying, "Do you think you should add another chapter about when a leader falls?" And it was about my relationship with Bill through the lens of Paul and Timothy's relationship. And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" And so come to find out, she's like, there's an article coming out. I just need you to be aware. And I was like, "Oh," she's like, "It's about a Chicago mega church pastor." And I wasn't thinking Bill. And when she told me, it just kickstarted a bunch of conversations that have been happening for 5 years within certain parts of the organization, that I wasn't privy. Every one of the executive team members, but 2 people weren't privy to the information. And so all of a sudden, it was like every single day, something new is coming. And what it did for me was, who can I trust? I thought I could trust that person, and they kept this thing from me. And when you don't know who you can trust, it's almost like you start gaslighting yourself, because you're sitting here going, if I tell that person, are they going to be safe? No, you can't. And you start overthinking, and it just starts churning within. And so my therapist was the person I went to just to have space. And then I had a couple mentors who were on the outside that I went to, and just because I did not know who I could trust within the organization. And that's a hard place to be. And one of the mentors outside, I'll never forget, he just said, "Steve, in the midst of this, you have to have values that are higher than the chaos? So what are your values that are higher than the chaos? Because everything in the noise is going to want to bring you down to this. But like, what are those values? And I wrote integrity. I just started like naming those values. Okay. So some of this might come at a cost. How will you choose to respond? And I just had, a real kind of way of looking at this. It first started with Bill. If Bill owns his stuff, I'm still there. Then I went to the elders. Then I went to the next lead pastor who was my boss. And those three parties didn't address it. And then it fell to me. And so I think you have to ask yourself, if you're like a junior high pastor or like middle management in a not-for-profit organization, it's that responsibility or that mantle is not coming to you. But if you're up in leadership, I think you again have to really ask yourself, okay, from the values that I hold that are my true north, will I follow those through, even if it costs me my salary? Even if it costs me my job, even if it costs me what a large number of people will think about me, even if, will I still trust because of these values? And that's where I got to. I got to that place mixed with the brave story of Pat Baranowski, who went public about her story with notes and pictures in the New York Times. And I just felt like, man, I have to stand with her. I just have to stand with her. And this will probably be the way that everyone now recognizes their sin in the house if I step away. And that's, and I Monday morning quarterbacked this so many times that I did do it the right way. Could I have done it differently? But all I can say is what I knew then, and in that present moment, I did what I felt like the Lord was asking me to do. And it was the hardest decision of my life. And then you wake up the next morning and you realize, oh, I don't have a job. I don't know. What did I just do? Like, I don't have a trust fund. Like, what? And all of just the insecurities and the unknowns, just really quickly that anxiety started to rise within pretty quickly.
Is there a thought for you in that space of what's next? Well, I'll just find another megachurch. I'll just go somewhere in Texas and get another one. Or were you just like, I need to insulate? Like what was the kind of spectrum of thinking as far as your options go in those moments?
That's a great question. Yeah, you'll see, like, I'm very simple. I just like break everything down. But I thought I had 6 options. 1, go be a senior pastor. 2, go be a teaching pastor. 3, go be a campus pastor. 4, go plant a church. 5, do the Mike Bro plan, which was basically go to 5 churches and teach 8 times a year. Or 6, do the Bob Goff plan and teach 52 weekends at 52 different churches, maybe 1 or 2 or 3 messages total. And I just realized I'm struggling to trust any sense of leadership because I vacationed with these people and I didn't know. I just didn't know who I could trust, and I didn't know if I could trust myself. And yet the longing for security and the need for healing were at odds. And so I just realized, senior pastor, I'm not ready for that. Teaching pastor, I'm not ready for that. Campus pastor, no. And it just came down to the Mike Bro plan. And I realized if I could find a few churches that I could serve at and almost have those pastors be like an elder board for me that could check in every time I went there to Colorado and talked with Carl Sutter, Indianapolis with Steve Poe, Arizona with Joel Davis, I could start to have these moments where they were asking me questions about my heart and my soul and my healing journey and my family's healing journey. And so that felt like the right thing. I will say, shortly after this happened, I met with a trauma therapist just to process through. And the trauma therapist heard my story and said, Steve, I just want you to know you're a victim. And then she said, but that's not the most fascinating part of your story. The most fascinating part to me is, why are you drawn to narcissists? Because if you don't figure that out, you're going to fall right back into a similar situation. And I like, it jolted me to that level of, ooh, wow. And I had to wrestle, like, where am I complicit in wanting to put myself in situations that felt secure, that felt like I was winning, that looked really good, that I trusted the institution, rather than actually trusting where God was leading. And so that led us to the desert. We moved and we spent about 4 years there, and I traveled and taught at those 5 or 6 different churches on the regular. And God really used the desert season to do a healing work within me.
I have only about 1,000 questions more. So I'm curious. I'm curious, what was the time span between your last Sunday at Willow and your next Sunday preaching?
August 5th was the last Sunday at Willow, and SCU, Southeastern University, and the Grove Church in Riverside, and Christ Church of the Valley in Phoenix, Arizona. Those 3 were the first 3 to give me a chance. And it was late September, early October, and then over Thanksgiving. And then once that happened, I realized that's when the 5 idea started to come. If I could find 5 churches, and started to pray through that. But for a long time, those first 6, 7, 8 weeks, it was a detox. Because it just was over. It was done. It was gone. Like, I wasn't going to walk on that stage, again, hopefully someday, but wasn't going to walk on there. And I probably wasn't going to get to see some of my friends who were on staff. The congregation, it just was tricky. It was really, really tricky on so many levels.
Did the church, the people who you stand on stage and you have this love connection, these are my people, did they feel like your people in the midst of all that? Or did you feel the arrows of friendly fire and the enemy in that season?
Yeah. What's surprising is I totally misread everything. If I thought, I'll do the right thing and everyone within will understand I did the right thing and I'll be able to come back. And the people on the outside will probably be like, oh, he didn't show up for work. He wrote a blog post, like, forget that guy. But I thought the people in the organization of Willow would have been like, he did the right thing. We're going to bring him back. Mm-hmm. What surprised me, it was the people on the outside. Rick Warren, Andy Stanley, all these outside voices start like coming and going, thank you. How can we help? They're talking to me, like they're church leaders around the country, emailing, what do you need? We got you. Thank you for standing up for the bride. And then inside, it was like I decimated their expectation for what I should have done. And the cruelness of a number of people, for the longest time, I had them like in a binder, and I had printed all of the tweets and all of the emails and all of the Facebook messages and all of the Instagram DMs out. And I just was like, wow, this is what Christians think about me. This is like people I like baptized. This is what they think about me. And I just had to sit with that and go, who does God say I am? Is this who I am? No. And honestly, like, it sounds like it was easy work. That was hard work. It was hard because I wanted to go prove to them that's not me. I wanted to fight back. And then you just get to the end of your will and you surrender and go, okay, God, what are we going to do? I can't fix it and I can't change it. So what's next?
It's, I have enough of these conversations, but it's the human soul is not designed to have that much fame, notoriety, to be seen. And I'm sure to the extent you felt some of that, it was even more so. I'm sure Bill could not go to an airport or a restaurant without being seen. But that to become, it's a very dangerous thing to become an object of worship for other people. Whether you're asking for it or not, whether it's feeding you or not. And then you run into Henry Nouwen's, I am what I do, I am what I have, and I am what other people say about me. And then it gets really hard. Even if you try to really keep your identity intact, it's still the words that come. How do you take the good in and not get an ego? And how do you take the bad in and not deflate is tough. Our spouses.
One thing can I add?
Yeah, please.
Yeah. One thing can I add to that is I think you're spot on. And the hardest work that I did is after printing that stuff out, I went through each one of them and said, what do I think they're trying to say? And I wrote it out. I'm just really bummed that you left. And I don't know how to say that. So I'm saying this. I'm really disappointed in the fact that you were put in this situation. And I'm so sorry. I almost had to and I think you're right. In the real time, you don't know how much attachment there is or how much you're needing that for your own ego. It's hard in real time, but when it's stripped away right away, all of a sudden, and then it's anger that you can't manage and you can't fix. I remember I was with my son and we were picking up drinks at Starbucks, and we walked into a packed Starbucks and some woman beelined, and my son's 4th, 5th grade at this time. And he's holding my hand, and this woman just eviscerated me at Starbucks. And all I could do was just take it. And I'm walking back to put my son in the car, and he looks at me, and he's an old soul. He came out of the womb with a cardigan and a pipe, but he just looks at me and he's like, Dad, when you always told me that if you do the right thing, you'll be rewarded. So you either didn't do the right thing, or that doesn't feel like what that woman said, a reward. And I remember thanks be to God, the Spirit just reminded me. And I told my son, hey, when Mom was pregnant with your sister, she threw up 2 times a day, every day. And then on May 22nd, 2013, we got to meet Mercy. And I don't know when we're going to have our version where you're going to be holding Mercy and what that will look like. But I do believe God is good. God is kind. God will see us through. God will reward this. But you just got to keep doing the work and keep leaning in. And he just looked at me. He's like, okay, I think I needed just to remember that, because I think I knew Romans 8:28 and Philippians 1:5, but I didn't know them. And it's not until those hard transition seasons, and you get to the other side, that you get to go, yeah, he is working all things together for the good, even when I don't see it and even when I don't feel it. He is. He truly is. It's,
I didn't expect this, but it stirs emotion, especially when we talk about our kids. And so I know that you talk about, and you're meeting with a therapist that says you're a victim, and I'm looking at it through my lens, which maybe that tells you something too. But I was not the victim. I was the one who, I did the thing, right? And it was a self-inflicted wound. And seeing the pain that caused my family to be in the pool 100 miles away from my church as, my confession letter is being read to the church, and being in the pool with my kid who's looking at me saying, but I liked being a pastor's kid, and knowing that he's not going to be a pastor's kid anymore. And I did that. But how did you, that moment where it's so like your kid is picking up on something like, this is not how it's supposed to be. Like this is not your enemy. This is a Christian, and I don't know what box to put this in. And then, then they're a teenager, they're a kid, and they just say, well, okay. And then they move on to the next thing. But what was this like? I mean, you had your experience, but then your family, and I know our spouses, they feel it's so heavy. Like what were the conversations in the home? How did that look and feel?
Yeah, it was a range of emotions. It was the questions, why did we have to move, and why did this happen, and why are people saying this stuff, and the sadness, or Emerson's buddy is saying something that's been passed around school about his dad, and it's just like him having to make sense of this, and so one thing that Jim Bergman from Flatirons said to me once, he said, you can have firsthand wounding, and you can have secondhand wounding, and you can have firsthand healing, but you can't have secondhand healing. And I thought that was one of the most profound things. Like, I can be wounded, and my wife can feel wounded, and my kids can feel wounded. I can have healing, but my healing doesn't mean that they're going to be healed. And we had to really come together and say, okay, almost like, what's healing going to look like for you? 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 And just to begin to talk about what you needed. I think each of us saw a therapist. Each of us had a process through. And I think the big surprise for me, honestly, 4 years in, my son was going into high school, and he was in the 8th grade at this time. And I said, hey, bud, where do you want to go to high school? I know we've moved you around. My hope is that where you want to go will stay. I've moved you already too much. And he said, I want to go home. And I said, where? And he goes, I want to move back to our old neighborhood. And I was like, that was not on my bingo card that we would move back. But my wife and I ended up choosing to go with what my son desired. And he had felt healed and had the agency to say what he wanted. And he's a senior now, and he's had the best 4 years, I think, of his life. He loves it. He loves being back in the Midwest. It's been harder for mom and dad for us, for like early on during that season, but it showed us the work he had done and the willingness to want to return back to our personal Chernobyl. But it was also setting the stage for the new role that I'm in today.
Yeah. You wrote a book. You've written a couple books, but I want to encourage everybody to get this one. Tell me about the process and just kind of the hidden treasure for you. Because I think when you write a book, it's I'm in process. So, but I've already received the message for myself that I want to share, with other people. But what were the gifts and the treasures for you in Grieve, Breathe, Receive? What was that process like, and what did you hope for as those would read it?
Yeah, one of the axioms that people will say when you're writing, and this, Matt, but you write to the person you once were. What you wish you would have had. What you've learned, so that somebody else who finds themselves in transition or loss or just change. And I realized I knew how to achieve. I didn't know how to grieve. And the desert, the deserted place, taught me how to grieve. And it was one day hiking. I got to the top of Camelback Mountain, and I thought about Holy Weekend, because I kept having this feeling like, man, Willow doesn't deserve this. I didn't deserve this. And I just felt like God was like, hey, Jesus didn't deserve it. And you realize like, oh, that's what happened on Friday. What happens when we get what we don't deserve? And oftentimes, and you know this from ministry, we jump from Good Friday, and because we need seats and there's not enough of them on Easter Sunday, we start having Easter Sunday services on Saturday. And so we skip Silent Saturday, which is a picture of the desert. And it was in the desert that you move from being in grief to trying to figure out, how am I going to get through this grief? And it slowed me down to just breathing in, breathing out, recognizing, oh man, I can either hate the weight, waste the weight, or win the weight. And in doing that work, I realize, because when the Hebrew people cross over the Red Sea, they're not that far from the promised land, but they spend almost 500 months walking and walking and walking. And I didn't want to spend that much time. I wanted to figure out, how do I get through this? And I think once you start doing the work, you then get the surprise of what Easter Sunday is all about. And I love that when Jesus returned to the disciples, Thomas is like, let me see the holes in your hand. And he has them. He's not fully healed. He has the wounds. He has the scars. I just realized with grief, you go from Friday being in grief to Saturday trying to get through it. And Sunday is the surprise. And you recognize that, oh, the grief is with me. It's just not as weighty as it once was. I don't carry it the same way because there is another opportunity. And so for me, just beginning to recognize, which day of Holy Weekend am I in? Am I in Friday right now? I get on Twitter and there's a moment where I'm like, oh, I'm on Friday for sure. Or there's a moment where I'm not sure with this relationship. Will there ever be reconciliation? And I feel like I'm in Saturday in the waiting, but how do I still do my work? And how do I keep praying just for the surprise of Sunday? And that's what Grieve, Breathe, Receive is just trying to give people a framework to honor what comes up when change shows up.
I love Walter Brueggemann. He talks about those seasons, right? The spirituality of the Psalms and movement from orientation to disorientation of like, what just happened? Where am I? And all we want to do is go back to Egypt because it was comfortable. It was known, and there is no going back. There's only reorientation. There's the promised land. But I just pulled this up. But during my wilderness season, it was Deuteronomy 32:10. And it was the position, because you ask in the wilderness, like, well, where are you, God? And I love that you said, like, they were close. They got as close as 11 miles to the promised land. And we forget that the whole, like, Joshua, Caleb, and the spies thing, it happens at year 2. Like, they're at year 2. That's when they get rerouted, and it's 38 years. It's not like they had trouble finding it. They knew where it was. God just said, you can't go in, right? But in Deuteronomy 32, it says, God, he found him in a desert land and in the howling waste of the wilderness. It's in the Hebrew, it's Yeshimon. It's scorched earth, like nothing grows there. You can only survive, not based on the hospitality of strangers, but the hospitality of God in that Yeshimon. Wow. And it says he encircled him, he cared for him, and he kept him as the apple of his eye. And I love, the crazy thing is that the word apple actually never shows up in the Bible, in the Hebrew. In Hebrew, the word apple is tapuach. And tapuach is not in the Bible at all. It really, what it translates, it's the word ishon. It says that God kept him as the little man of his eye, meaning that God was so close to Israel in the wilderness that you could be, if you got really close to somebody, you could see your reflection in their eye reflecting back at you. And it's just this picture of, man, we have a God that meets us in the wilderness, meets us in Arizona, and helps us to kind of put the pieces back and say, I'm with you in those days, in those moments where I'm not sure what's going to happen next. So you move back, you go back to the old neighborhood, and your kids are rebalancing. But you did not stay out of ministry. You are, or maybe you did learn to trust again. But you are in a position right now where you're leading a church. There is not just life after ministry, at Willow, but you are doing ministry after ministry. We're called to be ministers, right? But what has this experience been like? Do you kind of just go and dip your toe in the water and say, I'm going to test this out? Or did you just jump and I'm all in? Like, were you healed enough? Or what's this reentry process like?
Yes, great question. So when I came back in 2022, I was still doing the traveling, teaching. I had a church in Rockford, which is about an hour from Chicago, that I was teaching at regularly. And then this just came out of nowhere. And I've always thought highly of this church. They've had 2 pastors in 60 years, and they were going through a succession. And I was the first church that when I told my wife, she was like, Christ Church, Dan Meyer, you've always respected him. I think you should do it. As the first time she said that since everything had happened. And I felt the desire to. But then it was like, okay, to name your desire doesn't mean you're going to get it. And so it just went through a real grueling process. I think they asked me a lot of questions about the healing. They interviewed old elders from Willow. They did their homework on me. But I saw something in this place that I think when you're in your 20s, you want something, the ambition, it just takes over and you're like, oh man, I wanted something big and something that's growing and so where I can use my gifts. And then you get to Willow and you're speaking to this room of 7,200 seats. It's incredible. And you see the impact and that it feeds that ambition. And then life happens and life does what life often does. It shocks you and punches you. And you find yourself going, I just want something safe and healthy. I just want something and deep down, this place is just, some of the best parts of Willow that I remember. And then its own unique place. And so I think that was huge. The second thing I'd say is I was talking to a friend of mine, Daniel Grothe. He wrote a book, The Power of Place. And he just said that God calls people to places. And we often think in our day, God calls us to a position or to a title. No. He calls us to a place. And, you look at Francis of Assisi, Teresa of Calcutta, and he said, Steve, you're Steve of Chicagoland. And I just realized I love the Midwest. I love Big Ten country. I love the Cubs. I love Chicagoland. I believe in this city. And the fact that God made that true, and even after everything of 2018, knew he had called me to this place, and to make a place like Christ Church of Oak Brook, which I'm just absolutely loving. And real quick side note, my predecessor came back this past Sunday for the first time in 7 months. And it was both so beautiful, and also had this twinge of, oh man, it's what I thought it was going to be at Willow. And so had that both and of sadness for what I thought it was going to be and profound gratitude for what is. And it just shows okay, there's still work to be done and, stuff to sort through, but, God is faithful. God is good. And I love what you said. Just we're that little man in God's eye, and he sees us and he delights in us. And I feel really, really blessed to be here.
Yeah. I'm so glad you had that moment. That's, maybe this is the Brueggemann conversation, but he says what's promised in the covenant is not equilibrium, pleasant growth, kind of upwards and to the right, but what's promised is faithfulness, and you get to see the faithfulness of God. Do you ever have a moment where you think I'm going to build Christ Church and we're going to be the next, or are you just very content with this is what come will be, what God will do, he'll do, and I'm not pushing for it?
I think I still struggle with it, to be honest, because I have this, I have this inner, the way I describe it with my therapist is I have this inner Hybels that is driving for action and results and building. And I have this inner Ortberg, that is formation and character, and they don't have to be at odds, but somehow we've just pushed them. And so, but how to do that in a way that is honoring to the way God made me, the way God made this beautiful church, the way God made this staff, and not letting my own unhealth or sickness be pushed onto somebody else, but to kind of just trust God was here before me and God's going to be here but after me. My job is just really to pastor and to lead and to teach in a way that is true to the story that God is writing in this place. And so I have to like wrestle with that, because I don't want to like not be chasing after the dream God has, but I don't want to like chase at the cost of formation. And I don't want the formation to lead so much that I'm just kind of not doing anything, and so how do those two come together has been something I've just been trying to process and learn how to do. By far, not even close to mastering it, but that's the stuff the interior work right now that I feel like the Spirit's been teaching me, especially being in this lead pastor seat.
No shortcuts, right? That's good.
No shortcuts. That's right.
It's I love this. Thank you for the conversation. I love Steve of Chicagoland, that God has put you in a place. Places are significant. God does do things in places. He cares about the people, but he puts them in places. And oftentimes he's called Hamakom. He is the place. And that's a beautiful picture as well. And that's probably the best place that any of us could be. So Steve, I want to, is there somewhere that I can send people? I'm going to put in the show notes a couple of links, but certainly for your book, but even just the church, or how can people just stay in touch with what you're doing, or maybe your personal cell phone number would be great, whatever you want.
Yeah, that's great. Well, take a cue from Bob Goff, 714-747-5301. That is my personal cell phone. But Instagram at Steve Ryan Carter. Matt Davis and I were joking about this before. It's like we both have the two names that every other person on the planet has. So at Steve Ryan Carter. And then if you want to follow our church, it's just www.christchurch.us, and you can check out our church.
Yeah, it's good. MattDavis.com has been taken for a long time, and it's like a blog, and the guy has been sitting on it. There's not been a post since 2014, and it makes me crazy. So
crazy.
One day. Steve, thanks. Next time in Chicago, let's go see a Cubs game. It'll be good.
Let's do it. I'm going tonight. We got to beat the Brewers. So
there you go. All right, brother. Thank you. Thanks for coming on.
All right. Take care.
Ministry transitions don't just change resumes. They expose our gods, the things we worship. And Steve's story reminds us that platforms are fragile, but calling is stubborn. And integrity doesn't always win the news cycle, but it always holds up in the mirror, and even in our kids' eyes. If you're standing where Steve stood, torn between what's expedient and what's true, you don't have to walk it alone. It really is the reason that we started Ministry Transitions. And our hope is that we can have a conversation. You can book a call. It'll be confidential. Whether you have an upcoming transition or a termination or a succession that's coming up, maybe you need to give support and come alongside a leader who's in crisis already. We have on our website practical resources and messages on blogs and even more podcast episodes. Whether you're on a board or an executive team and you want to protect and love people on their way out, preserve the purpose of your mission, and plan what's next without breaking it all. And we're also going to put some links to Steve's work, his book, Grieve, Breathe, Receive, his teaching, and some Christ Church of Oak Brook website links. All that will be here in the show notes. If today stirred something in you, then start there. Endings feel like death. We've heard it more than once on this episode and even in the conversations we've had on many others. But in the way of Jesus, death never gets the last word. So wherever you're at today, may you find the courage to tell the truth, the patience to heal without hurrying, and the freedom to choose a life that's smaller on paper and larger in the kingdom. So grace and peace. Thank you for listening. This is the Life After Ministry podcast.